So as we move along, let me kickstart the discussion by saying just saw that there are fantastic numbers which are coming in terms of some of the numbers and projections that we're looking for this industry. If I may request Joy to add a few things about what he thinks are the growth drivers for this industry, what's propelling it from where it was to where it is, and what is expected to propel forward. So, Joy, looking forward to hear from you on this one.
Uh, Thanks, Prashant. I think basically what we're looking at is a combination of two, three very important things. One is obviously internet penetration, the kind of penetration that we have. Number two is that increasingly we have a product which is over many years of now iteration, much easier to use, and people are being able to many of the people in this space are being able to adapt it better and better. The UIs are getting better, so easy to adopt, better internet connectivity, and sport is definitely an area of interest, and that's something that's going to grow over time. And that's not because Indians are particularly sporty. I'll say it's the other way around. The base level of Indian sport is so low, other than cricket, that the only way is upwards. So interest in sport, as media explodes, the interest in sport is going to explode. So between that, the kind of offering, the much more sophisticated offering that you get now in terms of the product, ease of use of the product, and the fact that internet connectivity is good, I think these three together create a really an engine to drive fantasy sports really strongly.
Thank you. Thanks, Joy, for your views on that. So moving on to our next one, we see that there is a spurt of companies which are coming up and getting into this online gaming federation and fantasy sports as such. So as this particular industry grows, we've seen that this has got recognition into the mainstream now. There are a spurt of these companies. So is there something that would keep and separate one from the another? What will be the growth factors that they should look at to kind of attract customers, retain them, increase the kind of interaction with this? So, Nikhil, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are a mix of factors which come to my mind, and one of them actually was mentioned by Joy. User interface, ease of navigation, UI, that's definitely one of the key factors. So, and why it is important to mention here is because I personally feel white label solutions won't really work anymore, because you're competing against the top 4, 5 or top 10 operators who have like dedicated tech teams, who have the capabilities and understanding and the nuances of the data, and they're really working 24/7 to improve the products, and weekly basis, on monthly basis. So literally just the white label solutions won't really work anymore. Then next would be that there has to be some unique offerings which would differentiate one product from another. That could be one, and we have seen in the past that products have used features like live streaming of content, live scorecard integration, offering in regional languages, usage of fantasy influencers and prediction. That's something which is, it's a new trend which is coming up. It's becoming an established trend. Seamless payment gateway is a basic thing these days, but at the same time, faster withdrawal is something which will build trust and sort of can be a differentiating factor, because once you lose a customer and delay a payment withdrawal, then really it's really difficult to retain the same set of customer again. Then brand loyalty, that becomes really important, and that's in fact a challenge even in the bigger operators. And we have seen in the past that especially in this category particularly, that there's some brands, some products have similar sort of names, so there's some bit of confusion sometimes. So hence having a unique or a talent or endorsement is really important. Still there are I personally experienced that even in our trade, in commentators, in the broadcast industry, where we have seen that people in spite of seeing the brand for so long on television, that still people sometimes say that this brand is the one which has Dhoni, this brand is the one which has Sehwag, there's Ranveer one, Virat one. So so hence we know that there's such a tough competition. You need to have that differentiating factor in terms of the talent. Then lastly, I think social media community, that's like the basic for any new age digital brand. And then lastly, the eyeballs. Obviously, you need eyeballs. More you're present in the high impact events such as IPL and the other leagues which are really business relevant and not just to get visibility in the event. So these are the factors which in my view, are important.
Right, right. So you brought about some very, very interesting points in that need to create a brand, need to get the eyeballs there, be associated with the right events and right kind of ambassadors per se, things like that. Also, what kind of a role can AI, ML can play in here? I myself have experienced certain things. I get a message after an event that I played. If you had entered into this contest also with the same team, you would have won this much more, or what would have happened? Scenario analysis and those kind of things. So what's your thoughts on AI and ML into this?
Sorry, you're
So
asking me?
technology. Yeah.
Sorry, please.
Yeah, Joy.
Yeah.
Please, Joy.
I wanted both of your views on that. Maybe Nikhil and then to join. Yeah.
No, actually, I was about to ask that Joy if you could take this because technology was like AI. I think it will be better if Joy takes it.
Sure. Joy.
No, I don't have much to contribute beyond the fact that it is getting increasingly intuitive. And I think exactly the kind of innovation that you spoke about saying that here, if you had played this game instead of playing the game that you are at, tomorrow you'll say, okay, you could have put in this player, you could have done so much better, or just this one change could have increased you by 25,000 points. All those are going to happen. And I think one of the things that is going to happen is you're going to more and more find games that you can play along. They are far better. I still think that second screen that we are using nowadays and trying to change our teams and trying to do things, I think that second screen is also going to evolve. I think the second screen is still not where it is a totally seamless experience. So I think those things are going to happen. The industry is going to grow, but even the basic product that you have now today is a product that is very important for not just the fantasy sports industry, but for the sports industry. Because what is the essence of fantasy sports? The essence of fantasy sports is it deepens your interest in sport. Okay. If I do not mind, I normally will not watch a West Indies versus Pakistan match with as much interest. But if the players on my team are playing out there in that particular match, I will watch them because I want to know what's happening out there. So anything that deepens interest in the actual sport on the ground is very important for not just the fantasy sport industry, but the sports industry. And that's the brace of fantasy sports, saying that you are no longer a passive spectator. You're somebody who can participate in the game. You have a chance. You have a place to participate in, win, lose, and show your skills. So I think that essence will always help. And so when we look at the growth of fantasy sport, we should also look at it saying that this is just the growth of fantasy sport, but how much is it helping grow the rest of sport? And it's really vital for it.
In fact, it looks like it is touching a very important human sentiment there. I can recollect where I'd watched a movie once and a normal thing, and I happened to watch that movie again on another OTT platform, which gave me certain information as I watched that, saying that, what, this particular thing was shot in this place, this particular thing was this many retakes, or this much money this particular thing made, or this song sequence made. I got a bunch of bragging rights after that, and I could talk about it more, I could follow it, relate it more to it. I guess the same thing comes here as well. And a very other important thing that comes in, and especially I face this as a user myself, is when you're playing and you have a team member from both sides in your team, and then it's national interest, you're supporting a particular team versus your team. It becomes, you get involved so much into the game that you don't know where to put your interest on.
No, that's a very common thing. And look, that's what sport is meant to do. Sport is meant to, as the deeper we can make that connection with the sport. And I think this is most importantly, giving more information, I think is fantastic. But more than that, also involving me, giving me a personal stake in the game, and giving me a chance to say that, what, I picked that guy and he did really well. Ravi Shastri should have picked him for India as well. Look how well he did for me in the IPL match. That makes such a difference to me, because that personally empowers me and makes me feel as if, what, I know a little bit about this game. I can also pick the right players. And that's the kind of thing that sports people crazy about sport really want. And I think fantasy sport is that vehicle for that.
Yeah, one other thing that I wanted to check with you is we're talking all about the organizations, the economy, the kind of economic impact it's creating. Maybe let's get to the user and look at it from the user's eyes per se. So, Joy, if you have to tell some tips to the users, how can they make their game better? What are the things that they should do to be a better player? It's a sport, all said and done, right? So let's hear it from the sports guru and writer. What is to be done? How is it different from playing any other sports?
Look, I designed the original Super Selector platform, which was at 20 points, 200 points, all that. So the point of it is, at that point in time, I really knew what I was doing. At this point in time, I have to tell you that, technology, people, so many bright minds have worked with it. Look, the only thing I can say is that A, you need to really do your homework. B is that there's this one thing which, we get into a lot, which is a sunk cost bias. We take a player 3 times and we think that, we've taken him, we've invested in him. This is the guy who's going to do it for us. When you play a game of fantasy sport, you have to be very, very unemotional about playing. Don't bring your emotions to a fantasy sporting game. They don't work. They never work for you. I mean, you might win, but your odds of winning playing on the basis of sentiment do not work. Do your homework. And there are a lot of good sites today. And that wasn't there in our time, of course, because it is a fledgling industry. But today, there are a lot more good sites which can tell you a lot about how you can make your changes. And I don't even presume to know as much as they do right now. And we used to think we were experts back, but that was 20 years back. I think technology and the sport has just moved way beyond that.
Nikhil, you want to add anything on that?
No, I think Joy is he's 100% right about this. I would sort of connect it, or probably like Joy mentioned about being unemotional about usage of the selection of the right player. It's something probably, I don't know if it's the right way to resonate it with the stock market of how you pick stocks. So you do your deep diving and probably understanding of why you're choosing it, and not just because you are a consumer of that product. So not just because you're a fan of that product. So I do feel that it makes sense. And then if you know why you're choosing it, if you have insights, and a lot of influencers are doing this, their insights are making people money and making people win. So yeah, that's what I would say.
That's the thing that I was looking to hear from. I know of a particular player who plays it like the stock market, in the sense how you mix your investments to large caps, small caps, and mid caps when you do an investment into your stock market. So this player actually thinks of it that way. He says, you know what? If I have a particular person as a captain, I'm getting 1.5 points for that, 1.5 times the points for this particular person. It is not that I have to make the person who's the most popular as my captain. He often goes with the underdog as the captain. So when the underdog performs, he can be at the top of the table. Whereas normal ways that we put in on the most, the star player per se. When the star player performs, there is another 13 crore users who will also do well along with it. Everyone gets equal points per se. So that was one insight that I learned from him. Another important thing, what he said is, he picks his contests. So he says, you know what? Yes, I may be intelligent. I respect the fact that there are more intelligent people than me. So I do my statistics and analysis. I create teams with various combinations, and I don't enter with one team. I enter with X number of teams, so that this compensates out and things like that. And then, okay, a match with so and so popular. There are these many great minds coming in. Why don't I try my luck in a league which is not really having so many competitions in me? So it's a wise man's game. How you think about it as such per se.
In fact, I pick up an interesting point. The same thing used to happen in our time. It used to be free. And this is 2001, 2002. The Infosys bench, anyone who was in the Infosys bench had 50 odd teams, because they had the bandwidth, they had and they had 50, each of them had 50 teams. And as players kept going, they discarded. See, Prashant, what you're saying actually makes sense in a large game. When you're playing, so your strategy also depends on the size of the game you're playing. If you're playing with 10 other people in a room, you will pick the guy who's likely to do well to win. Okay. Right. If you're playing in a game with 1 crore of people, you have to go with choices which are unconventional, otherwise you're never going to win. If the conventional choices win, anyway, a lot of people are going to win. It's not going to make a difference. So the point is, the size of the game, to a large extent, dictates strategy. And that is something that, and if you're playing one-on-one, just the two of you versus a friend, then it's often being much more conservative than you would be playing against a million other people. So very much a product of the size of the game that you're playing and the kind of game or the kind of stakes you want to play with.
Very true, very true. A lot of things are there. So, moving on to another interesting topic, we spoke about this virtuous cycle of sports development that the industry has done and has got to do as it moves along and rolls into the juggernaut. So, Nikhil, if you want to talk a little bit about this virtuous cycle, what are the various areas in which the OFCs are playing right now? What would they do as we go along? Some thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think you just put it correctly. It's actually a virtuous cycle of sports development. So any sport or league can only grow, sustain, survive if there is enough and more commercial support from the partners, from the sponsors. Today, all the stakeholders, which include federation, league owners, team owners, players, even broadcasters, have OFS operators on their speed dial. The first category which comes to their mind at the budgeting stage of an event is, OFS. Let's look at the biggest one, the IPL. um, the last completed season, IPL 2020, had, in terms of the overall contribution, more than 20% of sponsorship and ad revenue came from this category, which makes it the biggest contributor to this biggest event, which is massive. It has come to a point where it has become unimaginable for the broadcaster to decide on acquiring new leagues, new league right without the support of OFS operators. I've personally had many conversations in the past with many, rights holder, or even, in case some cases broadcast teams, where they sort of anticipate and try to figure out which of these, what is the kind of potential you can expect from this category. Moreover, OFS operators also realize the importance of live streaming of the content. And so instead of being dependent on just the broadcasters, few have actually ended up launching the OTT platform, which has made it possible to control most of the ecosystem. It's obviously relatively easy to scale an OTT platform versus to, launch a TV, a channel, a linear channel. It involves a lot of nitty-gritties and licensing and other things, especially for the tech-able teams. But I won't be surprised, and probably somebody can give this idea that maybe OFS operators tomorrow end up acquiring a sports channel too. And now if you look at the state level leagues, barring two or three leagues which has national broadcast coverage on the mainstream TV channel, rest have failed to even get a broadcaster. But fortunately, they have an OTT platform to take care of, and that has ensured that there is active engagement, there are active consumption of that content, there are eyeballs on that content, and hence there is that event is being followed, and it has sort of survived one season, and there's a potential to see another season for that event. Now, once there is support from a broadcast partner, then the next step is to find the title sponsor, the other event sponsors. It becomes easier for the teams to find sponsors. Entire sports ecosystem benefits from this. Federation can further then invest on the in the sport development, the players, and then there's a chance that even if there are corporate entities involved or backing any particular league, that league will see the next season. So it's definitely it's a cycle where if you have commercial support, then you see the next season. Otherwise, the likelihood of surviving and going to the next season is very difficult. Yeah.
Right. So one thing that came in here is the kind of support it can give all around in terms of whether it is to the sports ecosystem, flowing back in terms of sports infrastructure per se, or the broadcast rights, and the advertisements itself, which are going to decide how large a scale the event is going to be. So that's nice to hear and understand as such. So one other interesting question: a lot of these things start and end with 11, and as we see also, there is what do you say, cricket is 85% of your kind of revenue generator here. So Joy, if you want to maybe add on one interesting story that you had when you were kind of working on this with regard to the volleyball team that you were working with, and how that went through the thing. So do you want to share some insights on how a small sport sporting event, which was not a league event before, progressed, and how did fantasy sports have a role to play in it?
Yeah, thanks, Prashant. Yeah, basically what happened was a couple of years back, we did a volleyball league called the Pro Volleyball League. And when we started off, we had a partner, very early days yet, but we had a fantasy partner. And we helped and we sat with them and helped devise what were the rules and what the kind of rules that were made for getting, who's a libero, because there are players in volleyball you need to understand. And we put it together. And we were quite happy about the fact that for us, it was important to have a partner and start growing sort of a deeper appreciation of the game, because that's what fantasy sports gives you. So the first day, and it wasn't exactly an 18-day league. So basically, the first day that we went and we started it off, there were 4,000 odd people playing. And there are 18 playing days. So the day before the finals, when we had the second semi-final, we had 87,000 people. So from 4,000 people, in 15, 16 odd playing days, we had gone to 87,000 people. That was the kind of interest that grew as people played along and kept playing along and started understanding who the good players were. And remember, these are players, volleyball players are not as well known as cricket players. So they're discovering these players as they go along, figuring out what they are. And in 17, 18 days, we have 87,000 playing. So we looked at it and said, I really hope that the finals hits the 100,000 figure, because, it's a landmark kind of figure, that from 4,000 to 100,000 the finals. And the next day, it was a fantastic finals. Chennai Spartans won. We looked at the results. There were 167,000 players, not 100,000, but 167,000. And that really gave us a sense of how it's both ways, how a game being popular, as the game got more popular, we got more fantasy players, but the fantasy players also sort of extended, and other fantasy players came and said, look, this looks interesting. Let me have a little. So it's not just players coming into fantasy because of volleyball. It's a lot of fantasy players coming into volleyball, seeing other fantasy players who play cricket also playing this. And I think that double thing is a very, very important thing for the smaller sports. You see, the largest sports, cricket, at the IPL level, at least, cricket can survive without fantasy sport. I'm not saying it's doing very well, and fantasy sports is a huge addition to what cricket already has, but cricket at the IPL level can survive, or at international level can survive. A lot of other sports in India today really can stand up on their 2 feet thanks to fantasy sports. And I think that's really important for the rest of the ecosystem. And for anyone who investing in this space, remember, real growth is going to come from that remaining ecosystem. Cricket is, if not, cricket is never, I'm going to say, be saturated, but cricket is at least close to realizing the kind of numbers it should realize. It's 70% there, 80% there. The rest of the sports are 5%, 10% there. So there's a huge, huge place for other sport to come in there.
And how does this get augmented when we talk about women's sports as well? Again, sports as a thing is dominated by male when you look into it. Now we're looking at a women's cricket team performing very well, women's hockey team performing very well. How is this going to propel this as such?
I think it's going to make a huge difference. I think the only thing that now they need, and women's cricket is followed in India, is followed pretty strongly in India right now. The women's hockey team was followed. All we need now, all the federations, the organizers need to do is string together a series of games, because you cannot play fantasy over 5 games. You just, by the time people get interested in it, it's over. Now, if you today had a women's IPL of at least 20 matches, I'm not saying go and do 50 matches now, but you had 20 matches, immediately you want to see the kind of fantasy that comes into women's sport. And I say the same again for hockey, that if you're going to play a hockey league, have a league where at least 20 matches, 25 matches are playing. Because I believe that to set up fantasy, for people to actually meet, fantasy is a habit. Okay, I come, I do it, I do make my team, and you need to make it habit forming for other sport. You cannot have a 3-match series and say, okay, let's play fantasy on it, because it will not work in the long run. And so I feel that one long run for any of these women's sports will really make a difference to fantasy.
Nice to hear that. So one other interesting aspect is this particular industry is attracting a lot of attention right now. You can see a lot of springs happening in terms of OFS platforms which are coming up. How do you see this as future? Do you see consolidations coming up? Do you see investments coming up on this? So Nikhil, your thoughts on how the industry will progress from where it is now till maybe 5 years down the lane?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a possibility. In fact, I mean, that's a progression which we have seen and which we usually not just in this industry. If you see food delivery, if you see, even in the cricket broadcast, there were multiple players, more than two, largely 2-3 players in the past, but now we have largely 2 or maximum 3 players. So in fantasy category today, hundreds of players are entering the ecosystem, and mostly with the white label solutions, without being aware of the nuances and high marketing costs involved in the business. And as we know, as we have seen in the report as well, that top 4 to 5, usually there's a 80-20 principle which applies in most of the things, where 20% of the key partners sort of contribute to the 80% of the revenue. But here it is like 4 to 5 operators control 95% of the ecosystem. Now, that means that in all likelihood, even if the new crop of the fantasy player operators come in, that the likelihood of those players already being playing on these one of the 4 or 5 operators is very high. So I would, in my personal opinion, I think the likelihood of these 4 or 5 operators sort of thinking of acquiring or merging with the new companies is low, because unless there's a unique proposition or offering by these new operators. Otherwise, there's no real sense of, there's no real reason to look at this sort of an opportunity. The real test would be the test of the time for these new operators, because to launch a platform and then run it for a while, it's possible, and a lot of people get into the business, and they do feel that there's good, and there is obviously forex and investment is happening, but at the same time, perseverance is something which is it's very difficult. I mean, it's a thing which will be tested with these new players, and we have seen in the past that there are players who have come in and who have sort of offered regional languages and other things, but eventually after a year or so it was not really possible. But what is definitely possible is that probably in the top 10 operators there could be some level of M&A possible in the future. That's what I personally feel. Yeah.
So another question to Joy on this one is, say, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So as more and more youth gets attracted to this, more and more they're getting into this particular thing. So there is also a bunch of activities that the OFS platforms are doing to kind of self-regulate this, ensure that it's in the right direction, etc. Maybe some thoughts on this. What are these activities? How is it being carried out?
No, I think there's already been. Look, I think so far the industry has been smart about it. Putting an age limit, having a KYC, putting things in place, making sure that people below 18 don't play paid games. So I think there's a lot already there, and I think they're moving in the right direction, because, look, the truth is the smartest thing to do is self-regulate. The smartest thing to do is self-regulate, because what you don't want is somebody else coming and saying it. See, the fact is that bad stories happen all over the place in any industry. Okay, I mean, do you want to pick up a book? I mean, if you turned on and said that, then the stock market should have been banned in America after 1929. The stock market crash of 1929, right? Because everyone went broke, and you say, "Wow, all these people went broke. Is it the fault of the stock market? Let's close down the stock market." That's what happens to a lot of other things in India, like fantasy sports. Somebody loses a bit of money, they turn and said, "What? He's lost money playing fantasy sport." Yeah, but he could have lost in the stock market. But those arguments are non-emotional arguments, whereas at that point in time, the emotion is what takes precedence. So in these matters, I think the smart thing that has been done is to say that, okay, these are certain basic checks and balances which we are going to put in, so that tomorrow, here's a KYC. That means we know everyone is in there. We know our TDS is being cut. The government is getting its taxes. Nobody below 18 is playing a paid game. This is what is happening out here. We are getting the taxes. We are passing it over to the government. All that is happening because the industry is deciding that we're going to do it. And if somebody is not following it, within the industry, there are aggressive ways of looking at it and saying that, we need to follow these strictures. And I think that's important and smart, because it's best to do it yourself rather than have somebody else do it. And I think it's the way to go.
Thank you. So as we move on to the next question, I would urge the viewers to post in their questions in the chat box as well. We will take those questions as we discuss along. So that's something that we'll do. So inviting questions from the viewers as well. One other thing that we look into it, there is a lot of things that have gone into create this infrastructure of online fantasy sports. So can some of these players look at geographies outside of India and replicate what's happening here? Nikhil, what's your thought on that? Exploring other geographies, like in a way you said, white labeling is what's happening in the sense. But you've got a bunch of things that is to be created. You've got the platform ready. Can that platform be taken, easily adapted to another game in another geography and use it there?
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible. And I do feel that Indian operators have all the ingredients, whether it is acumen, tools, resources, manpower, and now even capital to expand faster to other geographies, especially in the markets where sports are common. And we have actually seen that, not maybe actively in the fantasy space, but other gaming spaces. So that's definitely a possibility, and there is no reason why it should not happen. I think it's more of it's a natural sort of progression, and that sort of so I do think that that's really possible. And it's a regulatory thing. I mean, if there are places there where fantasy is something which is allowed and it's open, the rules allow you to open this category, so then definitely I think that's definitely happening. So that's the likelihood is very high.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from one of our viewers here for Joy. He says, how has the fan behavior changed from your super selector days to now, with OFS being so accessible? So how does a fan raise above favoritism? He's referring to your comment where he said you don't get stuck onto your favoritism. How does one overcome favoritism while picking a team?
I think today's fan is far more mature. I think today's fan has the ability to be able to look and say that, okay, country is one thing, I support country, I'm happy about that, but I'm not going to make my fantasy team based on that. I think far more mature, because remember, the exposure is far more. You see, in our time, how many online resources did you access? B, how many of those online resources that you accessed gave you very specific information? So today, for example, I could point out at least 5, forget fantasy sites, I could point out 5 cricket statistics sites which would allow you to get data, play with it, and really make a difference. I mean, you can really, the kind of searches, the kind of filters that you can run on data today is absolutely incredible. And this is not even, it does not require a very high level of understanding beyond understanding Excel to be able to do stuff like that. And that's what I'm saying, that this guy, now any person today who's playing fantasy sport has no excuse not to be prepared. In our time, they had the excuse, I don't have the information available, or the data available, or somebody else has it, or my newspaper doesn't even report scorecards properly. Today, all that data is available. I think, of course, the difference is there's so much data available. It's sometimes like trying to get a glass of water from the Niagara Falls, that you have to choose how you're going to put out that glass, because there's so much information. So getting through that information is more difficult, but the information is accessible, and I think fans are much smarter about it. They know you'll have very specific fans going to very specific people. Either it's somebody they trust, it's a language they're more comfortable in, it's data they like, particular analyses that they like more often, and they now choose where they're getting the information from. So I think that way, it's a much more informed audience we're dealing with.
Right. So as we speak about all this, I don't see any further questions coming up. Any concluding remarks from both of you? We've spoken about a wide variety of topics around this. So we'll close this session with a quick conclusion remarks from both of you. Nikhil, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think as we have seen time and again in the recent reports, which it come out in the last year and this year, it's a trend which is upwards. And Joy mentioned that sport is here to stay. Sport is only going to grow. And at the moment, what we are seeing is the largest contributor being cricket. But definitely, this is the skew is likely to change as we move in fact, that's something which we have seen, and probably the operators also realize it, hence they have sort of also taken initiative to promote and also acquire rights of international events, international league, which are very popular in outside world, but and there is a support which they're getting from the league owners of such as baseball or NFL, which are very big. But we do feel, I mean, I personally feel that it's only likely to grow. Beyond cricket, there is football, which has massive potential, and we are only seeing that trend by the viewership numbers we see on OTT platform, whether it's on Hotstar or Star Sports or Sony Live. So, and the same trend is going to be replicated on the in the fantasy, and the reverse of that is that fantasy is going to push further the interest of fans playing these sport, and then further helping grow the ecosystem. Yeah.
Joy?
Nothing. I just feel my concluding remark is simple. I love Indian sport. I've been a part of Indian sport for the last 25 years. Indian sport needs fantasy. It really needs fantasy, because fantasy does two things for us. It provides, as Nikhil and both you and Nikhil have been saying, money coming into the sports ecosystem, which is vital. That money goes all the way around the ecosystem. Every rupee that's spent on sponsorship of an event or is helping pay for an event is helping pay for sports. So A, it brings in money. B is it brings in a more deeper and more meaningful experience for the person who's playing along, not just watching sport. So I think Indian sport really needs fantasy to do well as well, because it's one of the pillars on which over the next 5 to 10 years, Indian sport is going to depend on very heavily. So yeah, I believe that fantasy will grow, and I believe it's just as important for Indian sport that Indian fantasy sport grow as it is for just the industry itself.
Thanks, Joy. Thanks, Nikhil. So as we go along, maybe it would be great for all of us if we don't have to maybe look for an archive video of a kabaddi match to show to our kids and say, you know what, this is how kabaddi was played. Rather than that, they telling you, saying that, you know what, this is the trick in kabaddi that you guys never knew about, and they're playing in their youths per se. So that would be the greatest success as we see Indian sports being picked up, Indians picking up sports more and more. As you see, like Joy mentioned some time back, you would have parents telling, you know what, you have to get up early in the morning to go to a tuition. So at the same rigor, you may have parents telling you need to get up and go for your training and run and become an athlete and whatever it is. And we will see a lot more medals for our country in various sporting events as we move along. And also people would dare take up maybe jobs that we may not have imagined at this point of time, as a maybe fantasy sports influencer, telling people where to invest, what to invest, which team to kind of buy on this fantasy league, etc. The jujudwalas of the fantasy sports, as it may become an inspire for a few. Thanks everyone for watching us. Take care. Bye-bye.